Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are totally stripping away the delicate lace, the teacups, and all those ballroom frills of Jane Austen's most famous work. We're going to reveal what it really is, a ruthless, high-stakes corporate thriller. Seriously, it's all about capital acquisition and systemic market architecture. If you thought this was just a cozy little romance, well, get ready to see it in a completely different light. Let's dive right into this. We are fundamentally reframing this 19th century classic. We're moving away from looking at it as just some unanchored tale of romantic excess. Instead, we're viewing it through the lens of a strict transactional framework for socioeconomic survival. Austen wasn't just daydreaming about love. She was charting out a very real and honestly very unforgiving economic grid. Here's the agenda for our explainer today. We'll start by mapping out the Regency geopolitical matrix. Then we'll look at Austen as a forensic social auditor. After that, we'll analyze the Bennett Portfolio Challenge, unpack overriding cognitive processing prejudices, and finish up with legacy and cancel culture. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Regency Geopolitical Matrix. Beneath the surface of all those peaceful rural ballrooms, the macroeconomic reconfigurations at the time were incredibly intense. You have the cognitive decline of King George III right at the very top, which kicks off the Prince Regent era. Then you've got the Napoleonic Wars leaving this massive domestic footprint. We're talking local militias literally guarding provincial borders. And simultaneously, the Industrial Revolution is just taking off, creating these hyper-affluent merchants who are aggressively rivaling the old-school landed nobility. It's an absolute massive power struggle.
Amidst all this chaos, we really have to look at the legal framework for women. The absolutely crucial point here is a systemic lockout mechanism known as the entail. Basically, these were incredibly strict legal protocols that routed property exclusively through male lineages. So this structurally barred female heirs from inheriting any of their ancestral real estate portfolios. And since women within the country gentry were also entirely shut out from corporate professional careers or, political autonomy, they were forced into a highly precarious economic corner.
So consequently, in this incredibly rigid grid, securing a marriage, it wasn't some romantic luxury. It was a mandatory economic survival transaction. It was literally the single valid legal maneuver capable of protecting human capital from absolute poverty and institutional dependence. Austen is brilliant here. She highlights this by showing characters who make purely tactical, calculated mergers just to secure financial protection. It really exposes a non-compliant economic architecture that severely penalized women who didn't come with an endowment.
Moving right along to Section 2. Austen, Forensic Social Auditor.
Now, Austen wasn't just a keen observer, she actually revolutionized the whole architecture of the novel using a technical engine called free indirect discourse. Basically, this structural layout seamlessly fuses a traditional third-person narrative stream with the deeply intimate psychological insights, internal ironies, and acute filters of her main character. She completely tears down the formal dialogue boundaries, which gives us this direct, raw access right into the character's internal thoughts and psychology. It was a real game changer. Operating right alongside those high-velocity romantic poets of the time, Austen completely rejected all that over-sentimentalized, extravagant Gothic melodrama. Actually, her whole narrative design prioritizes domestic behavioral realism. She essentially proved that true personal optimization doesn't come from unhinged dramatic outbursts, but rather requires a very calculated equilibrium. A balance between individual passion and practical, everyday reality.
All right, Section 3. The Bennett Portfolio Challenge.
This setup maps out the Bennett Portfolio Challenge perfectly. Look, you have 5, daughter assets, and they're all unmarried. Because of that entail we talked about earlier, Mrs. Bennett has one single, absolutely frantic management mandate. She must successfully liquidate these 5 assets via marriage before her husband passes away. Because if Mr. Bennett dies before these marriages are secured, it triggers total structural bankruptcy for the entire family. So the stakes literally could not be higher.
Then, the baseline stability of this whole local network gets massively disrupted when 2 major players suddenly enter the market. First, you have a highly affluent, unattached bachelor named Mr. Bingley, and right by his side is his strategic advisor, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. Darcy is this exceptionally wealthy aristocrat who holds the crown real estate asset of Pemberley. So overnight, this massive influx of capital is injected straight into the local ecosystem.
But Darcy immediately shocks the local society. He executes this incredibly cold, detached, and just arrogant protocol. When he's prompted to dance with our highly analytical and brilliant protagonist, Elizabeth Bennet, he issues this absolutely brutal assessment. He says she's, quote, tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. Wow, I mean, it is a massive, incredibly public downgrade of her social value.
Naturally, Elizabeth intercepts this single, highly arrogant data point and instantly constructs a wall of absolute retaliatory contempt. And this gets heavily fueled by false, deceptive metrics fed to her by a military officer named George Wickham. Wickham basically simulates this whole record of persecution by Darcy. Compounding the friction even more, Darcy secretly audits the Bennet family, decides they are socially unacceptable, and actually sabotages his friend Bingley's potential merger with Elizabeth's sister, Jane. The whole shebang culminates in Darcy executing this disastrous marriage proposal, where he literally details what a severe downgrade to his own status it would be to merge with her low-income family. As you might guess, Elizabeth vehemently rejects the transaction.
That brings us to Section 4, Overriding Cognitive Processing Prejudices.
Here we clearly see the dual systemic forces completely blocking their connection, which, by the way, is the very title of the novel. On one side, you have Mr. Darcy personifying class pride. It's this aristocratic hubris that totally blinds an executive to the internal value, the real equity of lower-tier social strata. Pitted directly against that is Elizabeth's individual prejudice. Hers is a psychological reflex to filter an external actor's entire character based purely on a wounded ego and some initial, low-resolution impressions.
So, the informational shock that finally breaks this deadlock is a factual data ledger. It comes as a private letter from Darcy, completely unmasking Wickham's predatory nature. This forces Elizabeth to finally, audit her own cognitive blind spots. But literally just as she's doing that, the ultimate crisis hits. Her youngest sister, Lydia, executes an unauthorized elopement with Wickham. This isn't just some local gossip scandal. This is a catastrophic threat that will permanently liquidate the Bennet family's social credit and render all the remaining sisters completely unmarriable. We are talking about total bankruptcy here.
But here is where Darcy steps in. Operating totally covertly behind the scenes, he acts like a high-powered corporate fixer. He deploys capital with pure executive precision, using 3 very clear steps. Step 1, he purchases Wickham's military commission. Step 2, he liquidates Wickham's massive private debts. And Step 3, he effectively forces a legal marriage. Just like that, he single-handedly neutralizes the systemic dishonor that was threatening Elizabeth's entire family.
Having totally dismantled their respective filters, Elizabeth and Darcy finally managed to override those internal structural barriers. They execute a definitive, highly optimized merger. And the best part? It's one anchored not just in capital acquisition, but in a deep, mutual intellectual respect.
Finally, let's jump into Section 5, Legacy and Cancel Culture. 90%. That is the estimated percentage of contemporary romantic fiction and modern Hollywood blockbusters, including massive hits like Bridget Jones's Diary, that still use Jane Austen's 1813 architectural blueprint as their foundational matrix. Think about it. 2 highly literate protagonists who initially activate mutual hatred due to structural errors. They trade highly competitive dialogue and then gradually optimize their alignment. It's a brilliant formula that absolutely still dominates our media today.
But here is the absolutely critical takeaway for us. Austen's original working title for the manuscript was actually First Impressions. It was explicitly engineered to serve as a stark warning about the extreme velocity of rapid judgment and the real dangers of making hasty generalizations.
I mean, think about it. The extreme speed at which Elizabeth bought into Wickham's victim brand and completely canceled Darcy, all based on a single arrogant data point, serves as an exact diagnostic mirror for modern social media behavior. Today, users who are accelerated by algorithmic feeds execute total reputational liquidations in seconds, and it's often based on highly edited, completely isolated content streams. Austen proved over 200 years ago that the cognitive traps of prejudice are deeply, deeply wired into us. And today, they remain highly active and dangerously updated.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this question to help you audit your own cognitive traps. In today's incredibly accelerated digital feeds, are you executing total reputational liquidations based on a single data point? Are you letting wounded egos and initial, low-resolution impressions dictate your final judgments, or are you taking the time to verify the data? Thank you so much for exploring this phenomenal social audit with me today, and hey, always remember to keep questioning those first impressions.